Cool. Okay. Welcome everybody to this evening's Over in the Scrutiny Committee. As you can see from the size of the agenda, it should be a brief meeting. About 600 pages, I think. My name's Councillor Paul Osborne. I'm the chairman of this committee, so welcome. We have a couple of members online, Councillor Maynard online, Chairman of Council, Councillor Mear, Councillor Cooper, the Chief Executive is online as well, and we have apologies from Councillor Legg. Yep, that's it. Okey-dokey. So, without any further ado, item 1 on the agenda, minutes. Do I have your authorisation as Chairman to sign the minutes of this committee held on the 13th of October 2025 as a correct record of those proceedings?
So move.
Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutions, just to Councillor Legg, as we mentioned. Welcome, Councillor Thomas. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosure of interest in dispensations, I would assume there's none, to be honest, unless you've got a site in the local plan. Councillor Maynard, got me wrong again. Member of East Sussex County Council.
Well, absolutely, Chairman, but I think that within the local plan applications, while I don't think you plan to discuss individual sites, there are sites within those allocations, at least one within my division, which I believe is owned by East Sussex County Council. So I'll declare an interest on that agenda item on that basis, a personal, not a prejudicial interest. And obviously later in the agenda, if often is mention of East Sussex County Council, if any member mentions or officer mentions East Sussex County Council, stand by for me to declare a personal and again a non-pecuniary interest then as well. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Cooper, did I see a yellow hand go up, or was that a mistake?
No, you did. It was just to declare that I'm a member of Westfield and Sedlescombe Parish Council and the Housing Company.
Housing Company, okay, thank you. Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, it's probably as well to declare, given that there are sites in Etchingham, that I'm a member of Etchingham Parish Council.
To be honest, I don't see the point. I'll be honest, I don't see the point, because there's sites in every single parish. So probably the bulk of us are connected to a parish council somewhere. So I can't see the point of declaring an interest unless the land actually abuts your property, if I'm honest. Maybe I can take legal advice. But
thank you, Chair. So, I agree, Chair. If there's any site-specific issues discussed which relate to any members, then on that basis, I think a declaration should be made. But my understanding is that there are going to be no site-specific discussions, Chair, so on that basis, I'm not sure any declarations would be needed.
thank you.
Just as Chair of the Housing Company, but I don't think there's any specific thing on the agenda to which that will be relevant, but if somebody brings it up, I thought it's just as well to declare now.
Okay, thank you. Right, is that it? I hope so. Yeah. Right. Item 5, Draft Local Plan Consultation Regulation, pages 3 to 456, plus the additional Bexhill specific, which come through the other day, of another 100 and somebody. So someone has been busy. And anybody out there who thinks we shouldn't print off paper, there's only 2 of these. Everybody else has it on an iPad, or I've got it on here, and I should put it back when I'm done with it. So, this one, draft local plan. Let's get a page. Right, as you can see, we've got to look at this and recommend to Cabinet that the draft local plan be approved for consultation purposes. The recommendation is that the Robert Draft Local Plan Regulation 18 document be approved for formal public consultation. Any comments from this committee be considered, and the head of planning be authorised to make any minor amendments and editorial, including presentational changes required to the Regulation 18 document prior to public consultation, in consultation with the Cabinet portfolio holder for planning. Now, as has been mentioned, and as I will say again, I don't want to get into site specifics on this. The idea of this, of the consultation, is to get into the site specific so that everybody and anybody will be looking at it, and it's upon us as members to promote to our parish councils and our areas, everything else, that this is coming, and when the consultation is live, they need to look at it and they need to read it because it will affect many people. So with that, just to get that out of the way, I will pass over to Holly and Mike, who are dealing with it. I think Holly's probably written most of it, and Mike just turned up and said he's the boss. So Holly or Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as detailed in the report and as Councillor Osborne has explained, we're requesting that the committee recommends to Cabinet that the draft local plan, as included in the appendices to the report, is approved for formal public consultation. Members will be aware that there's a corporate commitment to producing a new local plan for Rother, and work towards this has been continuing for some time. We carried out a public consultation last summer, 2024, on proposed policies. We have now prepared the documents in front of you for a second public consultation, this time focused on proposed site allocations, which we aim to launch in January next year, 2026. This is in line with the local plan timetable that was approved by Cabinet in March this year, which itself is in line with the deadline set by government for finalising the local plan by the end of next year, ready for submission for independent examination and adoption, hopefully in 2027. There are many benefits to having an up-to-date local plan. As noted in national policy, a local plan provides a positive vision for the future of an area and a framework for meeting housing and other needs and environmental priorities. There are significant risks to not having an up-to-date local plan, not least planning by appeal, and having development done to us, which lacks a coordinated approach to providing infrastructure. As you'll be aware, the government has made it clear that increasing house building is top of their agenda. Government-imposed targets that local planning authorities are required to plan for were significantly increased last year. Rother's annual target is currently 912 homes every year. This is more than 4 times as many homes as are currently built in the district, and almost 2.5 times as many as the core strategy plans for. We consider we have a strong case for not meeting that government housing requirement in full, primarily due to our significant environmental constraints. As you know, 83% of the district is in the high wheeled national landscape, and a further 7% is protected habitat sites. However, in order to have a new local plan accepted by an inspector, we will need to demonstrate that we have left no stone unturned in our search for suitable sites and that we have achieved as close to that target as possible. The draft local plan in front of you proposes site allocations for housing, employment, land and gypsy and traveller sites. In total, the allocations would result in a housing requirement for the new local plan of some 495 homes a year over the 17-year plan period that also takes account of windfalls. This would present a step change compared to average housing delivery rates over the last 12 years, but it still only represents 54% of the government target. Of course, the more housing is delivered, the more affordable housing and other community benefits are also realised. In terms of the proposed site allocations in front of you, these have been developed following significant work over a number of years. We first launched a call for sites in 2020 to invite landowners to send us details of land that could be available for development. We assessed these in line with a detailed methodology, together with other sites that we identified, and we published a draft Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment, or the HELAR, in summer 2024 last year. However, added together, the suitable and available sites identified at that time only amounted to around 350 dwellings a year. To seek to increase that total, we relaunched the call for sites this summer and have assessed the new sites received. We also looked again at those sites that had previously been submitted to us by landowners, but we had rejected, to see if any part of those sites could be accepted for development, having regard to our significantly increased housing targets. For example, we considered whether landscaping impacts could be mitigated or whether some development in less sustainable settlements could be accepted. We also looked at the density of sites, increasing densities in the more sustainable locations in line with national policy. Our assessments have been informed by site visits, landscape and highways advice. The proposed site allocations before you now represent the next stage in that process. To inform the final allocations, we now need to give residents, town and parish councils, businesses and other stakeholders the opportunity to comment and provide information on our proposals. This includes key stakeholders like National Highways and also infrastructure providers who are unable to advise us of their requirements until we can give them an idea of the sites and level of development that we are proposing. Therefore, the sites before you don't represent the final decision on the local plan, only a consultation. It is our recommendation that all of these sites are included in the consultation so that the public and consultees have the opportunity to comment on them at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Anything to add, Mike, or are you happy with that? No? Okie dokie. I think it's probably worth mentioning that when I was looking through this the other day, the proposal or the requirement from government is circa 15,000 sites or properties, whatever you want to call them, between now and 4041. Bear in mind that we've got 45,000 properties in Rother at the moment, so that's a third increase in 15 years, which is a massive, potentially a massive change. You know, we've got a population of probably, 90, 95,000. So you could potentially be looking there at 130, 140,000 people. I don't know. So big changes if that's all sort of works out or whatever. Charlie, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a massively important document, and something I'm very aware of is how long it would take to deliver this local plan. And when we're taken up by a unity authority, it's very important that they understand what is important to Rother and where we want to go, and it doesn't get overwhelmed by the bigger structure. Yeah, when you look at these government targets, I speak regularly to the developers at East Bexhill, and basically the number of problems we've got which prevent progress is one is a big increase in building cost materials, shortage of skilled labour. A developer, if he's got a big site, 100 or so houses, they ain't going to build 100 in a year. They build about 25, then they sell some to keep a cash flow, and then they start again. They haven't got the finance to go and get that money from the bank and build that amount of houses. So, and very often you find over the years that you get a major development planning application passed here, time it's passed and all the work's done, it can be 2.5 years for completion. So it can be quite a torturous process. These government targets are totally unrealistic, as you say, because of the environment we have in Rother and the restrictions there are. But we do what we can, you know, and but the targets are unrealistic. Thank you.
I'll go Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, a massive document and relatively readable, well done, because that's a real challenge. I note that you only want small additions or suggestions to the text, but I do think the 2 points I would like to make to see what my colleagues and yourselves think. On page 28 of the document, number 2 talks about nature conservation, and I would like to suggest that we add in. Shall I wait till you've got there? I would like to suggest we add in particular reference to the rights of rivers and rights of trees as agreed by this council should be inserted there. Is my suggestion. And my second suggestion is in relation to page 76, 6.23, which talks about the lack of availability of brownfield sites. And my suggestion would be to add in with a high priority to explore brownfield sites first. I think that will reassure residents, because a lot of residents are very concerned about the loss of green spaces and the fact that you have done that, and I think it shows in the document later on that you have done that. But so they were my 2 comments, but an amazing document, well done.
Are we happy with Councillor Burton's proposed wording?
I will make one comment for Councillor Burton.
Well, hang on, John, I'm going to take...
I want to make a number of comments.
Yeah, all right. I'll go Councillor McGurk first, and I'll go to you, John. Councillor McGurk.
Thanks, Chair. I had some general points to make about the document. I'll mention specific sites, but I'm not being site-specific. I'll try and avoid that. And the 2 priorities that I want to highlight, and it is a fantastic document, and it, as Councillor Burton said, it's really readable. And I know from talking to Rye Town councillors and people who work with Rye Town Council, how much we've engaged with the neighbourhood plan and people who've worked on that. So it's really, sort of feels root and branch. So very positive. The 2 priorities that I just wanted to highlight for Rye and the Eastern Settlements Cluster, which the strategic intent for Rye and the Eastern Settlements being a hub, a transport hub, a hub of industry and work. It's great to articulate that in the way that we have. And I think that's increasingly realistic when we look at the developments, hopefully, a few years away, but of regaining cross-channel rail links as well. That's going to have a really big impact on our part of the world. But I want to mention social housing and accessible active travel. I think on social housing, the draft plan identifies allocations in Rye Harbour and elsewhere in the Eastern Cluster, and they're really welcome, especially brownfield allocations at Rye Creative Centre, formerly Freda Garden, Stoneworks Cottage and Winchelsea Road East RY2. I think those are, there are other sites which I know are being looked at by Rye Town councillors and other people interested in Rye and Winchelsea in creating community land trusts, and I really hope we can engage with them because they've got some brilliant plans that are emerging, including detailed plans of how to develop stuff. There's a site right behind my house, so I am a proud YIMBY that has been identified for social housing, and I personally want to support that. Some of the numbers for the brownfield corridors look a bit low, so I would like us to look again, if we can, at RY2. I think the report says that 10 homes have been allocated for an area of 1.7 hectares, and I wonder if we can increase density there. Crucially, that risks reducing the amount of social housing available, And we know in our area we're desperate for social housing. We keep getting these developments that go off like a damp firework. You know, everyone gets excited about it, then nothing happens. The developers, you know, ride off into the sunset because they can't be bothered putting their hand in their pocket to create enough social housing, and that seems to be the main issue. Not that we want to discourage developers, we want to really encourage responsible developers, but it is incredibly frustrating because we're desperate for it. Our young people are moving away. People working in the hospitality industry can't get places to live nearby. But I do believe, you know, at the same time, those sites, some people will have sensitivities about those sites where they are, and that's understandable. I believe it's possible to balance protecting the coastal path and developing cycle infrastructure whilst making better use of brownfield sites as mandated in the government's national policy planning framework. And working, as I say, working alongside social housing being developed locally by the town council, their leadership in that arena is very, very welcome. The second priority I would really like us to step in on is building something like a Rye area cycle and accessibility master plan. We've got some great work, Sussex Greenways, Nick Hannah has done some fantastic work. We've got a blueprint already. They've been consulting with East Sussex County Council. We have Rye Bay mountain bikes who've developed some brilliant routes locally. You know, the Rotherwine Triangle, we're getting tourists from Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and they are, you know, they're coming over here specifically for our, you know, amazing countryside. It's fairly flat. And we've got some pretty good vineyard. We've got some really good vineyards. And you know, so to make the most of that, the recent drop curb improvements in Rye that I've been really happy to champion with local disability activists, local town councillors and residents, just shows what we can do when we work together with that local willingness. And those changes have already had an immediate effect for wheelchair users, such as, you know, Dan Lake, local activist, chair of Tilling Green Residents Association, who has done the vast majority of the work in Rye to really highlight the need for accessibility, and has worked with Sussex Greenways to develop a route that not only works for cyclists, but also for wheelchair users, people with prams, people with buggies. And I'd love us to see us building on that inclusive and practical work. So with all of those strong community-led groups, I think, you know, Rye Cycle and Accessibility Master Plan would bring those strands together, integrating things like drop curb improvements, accessible wheeling routes, and safe cycle corridors. And whilst we know that East Sussex County Council has had a plan, they've had a plan for a long time. They love a consultation, but it never goes anywhere. And it may not be specifically our role to look after cycle routes and develop these accessibility routes, but I think there's a strategic vacuum, I can't say strategic gap, a strategic vacuum that we could step into and really help to lead that space and work with local groups. So if we intensify our brownfield sites for social housing and really prioritise them, as Councillor Burton says and as the NPPF mandates, embed them in a coherent cycle and accessibility network, we create places where people can live well, travel safely and stay connected without relying on a car. And I just see that as the kind of resilient, inclusive development that my part of Rother, Ryan Winchelsea, and neighbouring settlements in Eastern Rother would need and deserve, and I'd love us to see us move into that space. But that's not detracting from a great neighbourhood plan.
Is that all stuff that you can include, or is that already sort of on the burner, if you like?
I mean, I'll try and answer, and Mike might have to come in. Did you want me to answer the point on the specific site that you talked about, Rye 2?
I suppose if you want to, but I would imagine sort of a general point. I think, Chair, is that right? Yeah. So.
Okay, so the cycle and accessibility master plan, it all makes sense, particularly as we have got that cluster with Rye at the centre being the transport hub, and obviously Rye Hub with all the employment there and the tourism at Canberra. So it does make sense. I suppose my concern is that we don't have a lot of time now to get it into the consultation for January, but there will certainly be time during the consultation to get those comments and to refine it further. And then there will be time before the end of next year when we need to submit the local plan to government. So that's my sort of initial response. I don't know if Mike can add anything to that.
So if I was to assume then, what I'm saying is maybe during the consultation period, your words may be included in your response, and then Holly and the team would have more time to put it in as a sensible thing. And being a member, you can ensure that it is voted upon later on in the process. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I think what I was going to add to that is also do bear in mind that we have the community infrastructure levy as well, so about £2 million a year. So, cycle improvements, I know that we have had cycle improvements submitted to us. So that is actually something where us as a district council can potentially look at allocating funding. So that's a very good thing about us having SIL. The other thing I was just going to say, just in relation to community land trusts, they're an excellent way of bringing forward affordable housing. We would completely agree with you, affordable in perpetuity. So anything we can do as an authority to support community land trusts, we will do. When it goes back to Councillor Burton's comments, and Holly will say if she disagrees, I think putting in there the rights of rivers and trees, I'm aware of the motion recently, I think is very sensible. I think when it comes to exploring brownfield first, and you alluded to, I know you're very aware of this, you alluded to this in your question, there's no way as members will know that we can meet our housing need or anything close to it on brownfield. I wish that we could. There's very few authorities in the UK that can do that, and we certainly can't. So yes, we will look to maximise brownfield sites, but unfortunately, to even meet the figures that Holly has talked about, it will require fairly significant greenfield development as well. But we can perhaps put something in around the brownfield, just to emphasise the brownfield first. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, I rather share Councillor Clark's feelings, although I'm not going to go very far with them tonight, about the undeliverability of this plan, like the national one. The trouble is, all the evils of our housing situation are being blamed on the planning system, and we all know, and indeed the figure of 2,830 houses unbuilt makes the point over again. The building industry is simply not building out. And it's not entirely their problem, because the disparity between incomes in Rother and house prices means the houses that they build don't sell. And unfortunately, our building industry has not invested in prefabricated housing, which actually would be speedier, would deliver more, and would require fewer skills. So there are a whole range of problems out with planning which are preventing this delivery of houses which the government wants. And there are about 1.5 million extant planning permissions across the country, unbuilt, which would actually meet the government's pledge if they could find a way of persuading them to build. We have one particular problem now, which is unsold houses in our neck of the woods are now being sold to London boroughs who are using them for social rent and adding to the problems of adult social care at county. And I'm bound to say, since in our housing strategy we stress the need for social housing, I would prefer to see us buying those houses and renting them than London boroughs. because that at least would meet our problem. However, that's going off-piste a little, and I will just go off-piste marginally. It's the language of rights that worries me about, emphasising the importance of rivers, which I do, and it does seem to me, I think trees are a slightly different matter, because there is some evidence of sentience there. But rivers are not sentient. And I think if we try and put that sort of language in either the consultation or the inspector, in the report to the inspector, because it's not a nationally recognised policy, it may do more harm than good. So I'd rather actually stress the importance of rivers and the importance of trees rather than rely on the language of rights, even though we voted for it. Brings me to another important point, and it's a bit difficult because we've had so many documents, and much of what was in the 2024 one is not here quite deliberately because it's already been consulted upon. But I see here that we are moving to not only deal with these specific areas, but we are dealing with the country area. And I make the point again, and I think it becomes even more important now that the government is pressing us so hard on housing, that we do need a chapter which explains precisely what it is about the high weald that needs to be conserved and enhanced, and what specifically we are trying to protect. Because it seems to me, and I go to page 52, there are two systems of numbering, but I hope you can find the one I'm talking about. By one of those strange vagaries, you found, or appear to have found, more sites in Northern Rother, entirely within the A&D, than you found in Rye and the Eastern Settlements, which are not entirely within the A&B. And that does seem to me a rather puzzling phenomenon. The figures are there, and Northern Rother has currently 267 approvals and ends up with a suggestion of 996 houses, whereas Rye and Eastern Settlement, with slightly higher number already allocated, ends up at 791. And it seems to me that somehow sends the wrong message and suggests to me we haven't quite searched hard enough in Rye and the neighbouring settlements. And I was particularly struck by the rather sensitive treatment of Beckley with the rather harsh treatment of one or two of the villages in the High Weald. But I don't want to get into site-specific stuff. My second comment is on page 64. We have done some kind of a reappraisal of the western bypass to Bexhill, but somehow we're writing off the chances of that because we don't think the sill generated will allow us to do it locally. I think we need to be much more proactive about the western bypass. And I think we need to say firmly that what was cancelled back in the early 2000s, if I remember rightly, it may have been the late 1990s, is now desperately needed. We're going to have a new Hedna. We're also presumably going to have a new infrastructure plan. I do think absolutely central, and it may even give us a few more sites in West Bexhill, but we do need to actually address east-west communication. And this is true of the whole of Rother. We have quite good north-south communication because of the A21, and we have appalling east-west communication. There is nothing really south of the M25 that takes you across Rother with any ease. And the goods traffic is thundering through the high-wheel villages, shaking them to pieces, because you cannot put bypasses in. So the case for the Western Bypass, as part of the Dover to Exeter highway, which was promised, God knows, by the Heath government, I think, first, really does need to be reiterated in every document we have. It's got to be to the benefit of the people living on the Barnhorn Road and just off it. But it's also about producing more land for development there. And it's about creating the east-west communication, which will take some of the heavy traffic off the roads of Bexhill. And it seems to me we need to be making that case rather than slightly brushing it on one side, as we do in this document. I would hope that paragraph, which is 622, can be modified to say this doesn't mean that the Western Bypass is not of the highest priority. When you come to, I'll use page 89 as my reference point, but when you come to the Northern Road, there's this usual slightly deprecatory turnabout at the fact that we rely on private car ownership. I think that now looks a little out of date because we've moved a long way from the old-fashioned diesels. I confess I still drive one myself, but nevertheless, we are on the edge of getting hydrogen cars. We have electric cars, they're a bit too heavy for our rural roads. But the notion that diesels are the predominant car now, or petrol, and therefore somehow this is anti our green strategy, I think needs to be modified subtly. So possibly the presentation there could recognise that people are now beginning to buy electric cars, particularly now they're becoming second-hand. Going to 679, I agree with you about the importance of the A21 corridor. I'm rather sorry you've abandoned some of the possible sites in other settlements than Hurst Green or Robertsbridge, which seems to me a pity, because I think there are other places on the A21 where some development might be possible to the benefit of the rest of the of Rother. But when you're allocating sites in Hurst Green and Flimwell in particular, you do need to look at the bypass routes for both. You happen at Cooper's Corner to have put in a development site that crosses where the bypass would run and where the roundabout is going to be built. So you need to modify that site to safeguard the bypass route. And again, at Flimwell, you've managed to put your major building site immediately where the bypass is going to go under the Hawkhurst Road. So that site needs real attention. And we need to dig out the A21 plan for Flimwell and for Hurst Green, because those two bits are urgently necessary. And again, will help you if they can go in the infrastructure plan. I come back to my central point, though, which is I'm missing all the documentation quite enough about what we are seeking to preserve and why it is important that the High Weald remains an area of scattered settlement. And the very fact we are being forced to eat into the green spaces between those settlements, if we need to look at the overall character and make sure we are not damaging that by eating into the green spaces between the settlements. I'm sorry to have spoken so long, Chairman, but I think these are very important points.
Thank you, John. Well, you did say you've read every page, so I think you probably found something to speak about.
I would just say I do appreciate it is an easy read, and I do congratulate Holly and the team on that.
Yeah, echo that. Jimmy, Councillor Strang.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I want to echo what Councillor Barnes has said regarding the need for a new link road from the A259 to the new Bexham and Hastings link road. I think this would go some way to alleviate the major issues facing the A259, Barnham Road and Marsh Road. I won't mention specific sites, even though I must note West Bexhill is hugely affected by the new draft plan. First, I want to thank Mike, Holly and all their officers for the huge amount of work that's gone into the draft local plan and site allocation. We are grateful for the time and commitment that's brought us to this stage. We are where we are. The government has set the housing targets, not Rother. Now we need our residents to play their part. The public consultation, which opens in January, is the moment for people across Rother to shape our towns and villages. Whether you support or oppose elements of the plan, we need to hear from you. It's so important, to be honest. Without an adopted local plan, Rother is at risk. We lose control over development and become far more vulnerable to speculative applications that don't reflect local needs. A strong local plan protects us all. Without one, decisions are taken out of our hands. So I would encourage every resident, business and community group to take their part in the consultation and make their voice heard. This is your plan and your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. That sounded more like something for full council.
First opportunity to come up.
Fair enough. Right. Councillor Thomas.
Chair. Okay, first of all, I haven't read the whole of the document, okay? So I confess that I'm not able to match Councillor Barnes in that respect. But because I haven't read it, I've got some questions which you may be able to answer and just say it's on the page, okay? My first question is about infilling. Now we know that many countries are actually meeting their housing needs by making a strong emphasis on infilling as a way forward. Is it in the document, please?
What do you mean by infilling? Do you, like with single dwellings?
Single dwellings, often where you've got, say, a garden or a garage or an industrial site with spare space on it, and you can infill. Now, apparently, according to the Architects' Journal, this could be a very major way of meeting housing needs. And insofar as looking at sites doesn't seem to take us anywhere near what the government would want and what probably we would want, ideally, in terms of meeting housing needs, I wonder whether there could be a paragraph or two within the document about encouraging infilling as a way forward. That's my first point.
Thank you. So what you are referring to, we probably refer to as windfall development. So development that comes forward that isn't planned for necessarily. So because we can't include every single site for 1 or 2 dwellings, we use a sort of a lower limit of 5 dwellings. So all of the sites that you'll see before you would accommodate at least 5 houses. But we, as a district, see a lot of planning applications coming forward for less than that. And they might be, as you say, between industrial sites or between rows of houses. They might be in the countryside. The current planning framework, which would be continued in this plan, would support, in principle, appropriate infilling within the development boundaries, so within settlements. In addition, through the new plan, the version that we published last year for consultation, we had a policy which looked at those opportunities in the countryside. So 1 or 2 dwellings where they might not be permitted currently, but where they could be appropriate in a small settlement in the countryside, in a hamlet, for example. So I think we do cover it in the plan, but what you're looking at now is specifically site allocation. So it is those larger sites for development. Saying that, there probably are sites within here that are sort of infills because there are dwellings either side of them, and it will be sort of a larger infill, so 5 or more dwellings. So hopefully it's covered but perhaps in the local plan at the end of the process rather than this document, which is for site allocations.
What I'm suggesting here is that, as it's a good principle, and I know that obviously site allocations is the main focus of this, nevertheless, what I'm suggesting is that there should be a clear statement that you're encouraging that kind of thing, not simply when you've got 5 dwellings, but just individual dwellings, because, many a mickle makes a muckle, sort of thing. So something very specific about that. That's my first point. My second point follows up on Councillor Barnes' point, talking about preservation. Is there in here a paragraph or a number of paragraphs about the importance of preserving particularly the wetlands, Pheasants in Cookmere Water Levels Management Board? I mentioned that I should declare an interest here. I'm a member of the Pheasants in Cookmere Water Levels Management Board, and there is a concern there about the cumulative effects of a number of housing developments on the hydrology of the levels. And I would like to have something put in about the importance of Rother District Council and its green policies for preserving the integrity of the levels in terms of hydrology. So that's a second suggestion. And my third one is that if you look at the bit on housing needs, and it follows up from what colleagues have said before, there doesn't seem to be sufficient clear reference to the importance of social housing and rented housing. So I'd just like to see the language change. That's on, I think it's page 19 on the one numbering system, and it's 7/32 on the other numbering system. So some more specific references to rented housing and social housing. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think to be fair, Richard, as Holly said, the windfall, a lot of what you was mentioning, sort of infilling, a large bungalow with a large garden gets flattened and you build 3 medium-sized bungalows. That's windfall size, as Holly has said. So I would say that that point is covered off. Also, if your organisation has got a concern with water management or whatever, then they will be a consultee, and you need to ensure that they respond accordingly. To be honest. So.
Come back on that, Chair. I take your point. It could come up in the consultation, but because the Council claims to be green to the core, I think it's important to put it actually in our introduction to the policy, so that we make it clear where we stand on issues like that.
Fair enough, yep. Councillor Mrs Barnes. Thought I was getting away with that.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This last week we learned that Cooksfield in Hurst Green had been refused on appeal. And although the inspector was full of praise about the wonderful view that there is between the A21 and the site, and although how important it is that we retain our lovely scenery, the reason she gave for refusing the application was the lack of affordable housing emerging in the neighbourhood plan. And in the what was the other thing? She gave 2 reasons. What was the other one? It was the lack of failed to conform to the neighbourhood plan. Failed to complete, yeah. And it now makes me wonder what is going to happen to neighbourhood plans, because clearly the inspector went off course considerably with previous inspections in which the maintaining of the AONB was absolutely sacrosanct, and in fact on some occasions had been the very reason for turning down the application. We know that neighbourhood plans are going to be losing their grants. That's going out of the system. So my question is, where is the protection of the AONB? That leads me on to the thing that I feel most passionately about, and that is that we are incredibly lucky to live in such a beautiful county. And although I understand the reason that that we're having to do this exercise, and hopefully a lot of the sites that have been identified will take us on well beyond 2041, when I certainly will not be on the planet. I just wonder if we can just bear in mind that it is the one thing that people come to East Sussex to admire, and that is our scenery. And it's also a bit of a hidden secret as well, because although we would like to keep quiet because it brings more traffic onto the roads, it does give us all a chance to actually look at the scenery ourselves and say, wow, that is the most wonderful view. So please can we sort of drop the plan, as there is in Hurst Green at the moment, to build, I think it was 150 houses or something, in a place where it's just going to be adding to the congestion. So if we could possibly just remember that Hurst Green has absolutely no facilities, apart from one shop or a pub. It has a lamentable lack of places to park. It is being forced beyond its own capabilities into a situation where it's getting so congested, it just isn't fun to be there. And remember that by piling more into it, we are merely going against what is our own policy, that we need to have smaller groups of houses, nicely designed. And design is also so very important, and I think we ought to be putting that into our recommendation. Not just any old designs, but properly thought through designs, because they are important to our landscape. So tourism is a vital part of our income in the county and in Rother. And let's give those who actually live their lives making their income from tourism, and just remember that they have a right as well. And yes, although I see the need for this, it's a bit of an abhorrence in a way, because I'm not entirely sure we need all the houses that we are going to be forced to agree to. It's going to be rotten for the people who live in those areas, knowing there is a kind of planning blight hanging over their own homes. And I think we need to be much clearer about how many houses go in each area, so that we can actually say to people, look, not only have we identified the sites, but we also have identified the need for that many houses in that place. And yes, let's go to the north, to the south of the patch and say, what about another look at those areas which possibly haven't had as much inspection as they have up in the north? I probably dribbled on for long enough, but I think really it is something that we need to take into account, and that is how attractive we leave the very place that we live in and hope to encourage tourists to come to.
Well, I could disagree with you there, because no, I'm nothing to do with building, right? It's nothing to do with it. What I'm saying is, you're saying you should be looking more to the east around Rye, where I live, where my patch is. So why should I take more than you? And you've got, and I could argue, well, there's more in the north because you're closer to Tunbridge Wells or wherever else there is to go, which I haven't been to for years.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying have another look at those places that you haven't
I
looked at as thoroughly as where we've landed up with so many.
Well, that's where there could be a disagreement. So, Holly, I'm assuming that neighbourhood plans, obviously neighbourhood plans, they work with you when they're doing them. So, it's a strong word to say they don't want to be road roughshod over, but equally, this has not come from us, has it? This has come from Westminster. And there is, you could say, the crux of the problem, and John said, oh, there's plenty of existing plan applications and all ready to go. But equally, developers won't build them if there's no market. And at the moment, the housing market is stagnant. So there's no point, developers, my brother knows blokes on sites, and the sites are almost mothballed because there's no one looking to buy. So what's the point of buying them? What's the point of finishing them off? You know, that's just a market, isn't it? You know, I think a lot of these sites where the sort of local housing associations are buying their 20%, 30%, they're the ones they're building. The others are just being put in as shells. The insides are left, and they're not finished until the market for private housing picks up and someone rocks up and buys one. But that's, you know, we can't force a market, can we? We have to do what we're asked to do is provide the land for if the market picks up, then someone might buy it. Who knows? So on the neighbourhood plan bit.
Thank you. I mean, we do work closely with the neighbourhood plan groups. As you know, we've got a number of neighbourhood plans that are in force at the moment that are made. They are all in line with our current local plan, the core strategy. So the local plan has to come first, so as in it has to be adopted first before the new set of neighbourhood plans, which will be in line with the new local plan, can come forward. So neighbourhood plan groups can continue to update their neighbourhood plans, but to look forward to the future that we're looking to, which is 2042, we need to get the local plan adopted so that the neighbourhood plans can then follow and be in general conformity with it. I mean, if neighbourhood plan groups, I hope, will respond to the consultation with town and parish councils, we have included sites throughout the district, as you can see, including in those neighbourhood plan areas at the moment. But, you know, we're happy to have discussions with neighbourhood plan groups if they have alternative sites, you know, they want to talk to us about. So I think that will just continue. In terms of looking at different areas, you know, I'd like to reassure you we have looked everywhere. We haven't favoured bits of the district over other bits. We are reliant on the availability of sites, so it's where landowners put forward sites to us. Many of the settlements along the A21 that Councillor Barnes referred to, we haven't had the site submissions there. So we are reliant on the site availability. And the sub-area names are perhaps slightly misleading, as in because it's Rye and the eastern cluster of settlements. It's a very large area in our plan. So it is Rye, which is mostly outside the national landscape, and other areas like Canberra. Those have their own constraints, particularly flooding and the habitat sites around Canberra. But there's also a lot of national landscape in that sub-area as well. So it's not all fallen on northern, although I appreciate, you know, that the numbers might sort of suggest otherwise. But I hope I can reassure you that we have looked everywhere, and we will continue to look everywhere, and we will continue to work with the neighbourhood planning groups.
Thank you, Holly. I think when the Peasmarsh neighbourhood plan was only adopted, I think it was last year, and when we adopted that it was sort of, you know, only adopted until I think 26 or might be 27, probably 26, because as was said then when I asked the question at full council, why has it got such a short window? You know, before they've sort of finished, right before the paint's dry or the ink's dry, they're looking at redoing it, and that is because they have to run to our document. So as our document comes out, neighbourhood plans will then have to be re-looked at to fit with our plan and try and hopefully provide the land that they want to be developed in, as opposed to those that don't. So that's an awkward one. John, if you're brief.
Yes, I'm wondering in some ways, this government seems to have said to its inspectors, give neighbourhood plans only limited weight. I still think we need them. I'm just wondering, I heard on today's news of, I think it was 15 parishes working together on a neighbourhood plan. I wonder if it might be helpful if we encouraged more cooperation between the parishes, so you get a wider area. And I had a question really for Mike and Holly. Out of a meeting I had this morning in Burwash, I heard about parish priority indicators, something I hadn't come across before. Is this official, or this is Bexhill originated?
Parish priority statements. We haven't got any in the district yet, but they are an option. They were brought in, not sure which legislation, through the legislation. They don't have the same weight as a neighbourhood plan. So although there's been some comments about, neighbourhood plans becoming less important, I mean, that isn't the case. A neighbourhood plan policy has the same weight as a local plan policy when it's adopted. Parish priority statements aren't the same. They don't hold that same weight, but they can be a useful tool to allow a parish council or a neighbourhood planning group to set out and consult on their priorities. And then we, as the local planning authority, would have to take them into account in planning decisions in the local plan, but they don't have the same weight as policies. So it's a sort of a watch this space, and if Burwash or anyone else is interested in preparing one, then do contact us and we can have those conversations.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper online, if you're brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not being site specific, I just had a couple of queries. In terms of the HELA, the land availability assessment, is that being used to identify the sites or not? I'm just going on from what Holly said earlier, that it was used and then not enough were identified. So is that being used as a tool to identify the available sites? That's my question one.
Yep, Holly.
Thank you. Yes, so the HELA, it's sort of an evolving document. We published the draft version last summer when we did the previous consultation on the local plan. Since then, we've had the call for sites remain open, so we've had new sites come in and we relaunched that in the summer this year. And we are currently updating the HELA. So what you see in front of you, the site allocations, they have come through the HELA. So those sites have been assessed as part of the HELA. What we will publish in January will be full details of all the other sites we've looked at and rejected. So all the sites you see as site allocations are the ones that have not been rejected through the HELA. There are also hundreds of other sites that we've looked at that have been, and the final version, the next version of that will be published in January.
And I just have a follow-up second question.
Yep,
is given that parish councils and residents have become much more litigious in recent years, can we confirm that we are not open to any legal challenge if we include unavailable sites in the consultation process and the draft plan?
I mean, I can answer from a planning perspective rather than a legal perspective, but this is a consultation. So if we were to include a site in the final plan that we adopted to government, that we submitted to government for examination, and that site was found to be unavailable, it's my understanding we wouldn't be open to challenge, but the inspector is unlikely to let us include that site in the plan. So in my view, from a planning perspective, there is no risk to including a site now that could be unavailable. Saying that, we are confident that we've done our work to ensure that we've done as much work as we can at this stage to ensure sites are available. I'm aware of Councillor Cooper's concerns about a site. I'm not saying now that we know 100% of the information about every single site in the document. That wouldn't be possible, and that is part of the reason for the consultation, to gather that additional evidence. But I think we've gone as far as we can at this stage to determine that sites are available, and there isn't a risk to including a site that turns out to not be available in a consultation. But I think Mike wants to come in.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Holly. That's a very clear explanation. I think all I wanted to say is, this is a consultation that we're proposing to start in January. It may well be as a result of that some sites fall out of the consultation, after the consultation fall out. So, for example, I don't know, maybe a landowner has a change of heart, It becomes clear that perhaps the highways isn't going to work. But by a similar token, some sites will come forward because people will think, oh, they're consulting, actually this is a good site. And you know what, in some circumstances we will agree with that as well. So I think it's, as I say, it's a consultation document, so not everything has to be perfect. And, we won't, if the site is genuinely unavailable, which we don't think is the case with what you've got in front of you at the moment, then that will come out through the consultation and we'll address that then. That is a very normal part of plan making, and that happens in every local planning authority. So it's an excellent question, but we can very easily deal with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If anybody out there is listening, wondering what the hell is a HELA, it's a Housing, Employment, Land Availability Assessment. So there you are. There was something else I was going to say and I've forgotten it now, so it doesn't matter. Terry, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. This is a general comment, not a site-specific comment. But when this goes out to consultation, there are always people who are saying, why build here, why not build, well, not so much why not build there, but don't build here, don't build here, don't build there. At the background of all of this is, how do we do on individual appeals? If we're going to retain any control over the building as various builders come forward with desirable sites, if we can demonstrate in this document, I think we have, I think it's an excellent document, it does demonstrate that we have tried our best to go to government and say, look, everybody knows we don't want this allocation, and I think it's no secret that if we were to make that allocation along with all the other councils in the country, it would be absolutely amazing. But have we really tried? Have we really looked at these sites? And I think this document demonstrates that we have, which gives us a very strong basis when our local planning authority says no, and the inspector is asked to look at it, we're in a much better state if that document shows that we really have tried to come up with the allocations or to meet the allocations that the government have set for us.
The question I was going to ask was, how long do we propose to consult for? Are you looking at sort of 8 weeks, 12 weeks? I remember years and years ago when I was the cabinet member for one of the local plans, it was down to me. So I made it a bit longer. So to get more interest. Got an answer on that?
What we're suggesting is 8 weeks. We need to be mindful that we need to submit the final plan to government by the end of the year. So we can't make it 12 weeks. That's our view. 6 weeks is the minimum, so 8 weeks gives everyone a bit more time. So that's what we are proposing. Okay.
Councillor McGurk, if you're brief, we've been on it for a bit.
I will be brief, thanks, Chair. It was just to add a bit of balance. I am really positive about the new National Policy Planning Policy Framework, NPPF. There are obviously logistical challenges, but we're talking about the kind of housing that people need. And, I said before, I am a YIMBY. I am literally supporting a project in my backyard almost. We want development, we want housing in Rye of the right kind. And Mike mentioned the SIL earlier on. As long as that's supported properly by SIL and it's the right kind of housing, we've got sites, we are desperate for housing, we wanted to go ahead. We don't want to take other people's allocation, but I think it's important to remember that there are young couples, there are singles, there are young families, there are disabled people who need modern, accessible, decent housing. There are older people who need secure housing all over this district and beyond. And I want to be ambitious about a house building programme that offers proper, sustainable housing for all of our communities. And we want it in Rye and Winchelsea of the right kind.
Thank you. All right, I've got Carl online. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And again, I want to be associated with the comments that have already been made, thanking the officers for the work that they've done thus far. I think that, There are going to be different points of view from different councillors from different parts of Rother. It's 199 square miles, but if you drive around Rother, they are very different communities with very different needs. And I have to say, having been involved in local plan processes in the past, there comes a point where infrastructure, especially where it affects the villages, we've got to remember there are no motorways in East Sussex, but infrastructure is the real bugbear, I think, for existing residents. And it's all well and good to say that we need more housing, but we are really struggling locally with our infrastructure, that lobbying with government to make sure that we have the proper infrastructure, the high quality school places, the doctor's surgery, etc., needs to carry on. And I was pleased to see that the leader of the council is on the call. And this is something, and again, I declare an interest as executive member of East Sussex Council as well in making these comments, because it is that collegiate approach in lobbying government that we need to really push on with, because there are, as I say, different points of view on how you meet those housing targets. But I just, without being flippant or even waxing lyrical about times gone by, it is very true that many of us, especially in the rural areas, when we seek to be elected, we genuinely believe that we share the views of our residents in that it is our duty to protect the AONB. And I do believe, quite fundamentally, that successive governments, regardless of political colour, have failed to address the fundamental issue, and that is whereby you have town centres and indeed brownfield sites that remain undeveloped, that remain full of low-quality housing, and there are opportunities to redevelop in urban areas that simply haven't been done, and where they have been done, they've not been done in a proper way to make sure the infrastructure supports the new house building. We've really got to be very, very careful when we put forward these sites. I think officers clearly have been very careful in doing that thus far. I do think it's unfortunate, and again, this is something we can address at full council. Whilst I share Holly's view around the workload required, I think it's absolutely vital that in order to get the level of engagement that we want to see, and as I say, I reference back to those that we've done in the past, the longest possible consultation so that we can give everybody the opportunity, particularly not just individuals, but those parish and town councils. I think it's absolutely vital that they respond to the consultation, because let's make no bones about it. Let's be absolutely clear. And the biggest legacy of any particular district council is around that local plan. It's the built environment. We must get this right. And without being site specific, there are sites that are going to be consulted on that are hugely controversial. We need to be able to go out to our parishes, to go out to our residents, whether in fact we live in parishes or indeed the towns within Rother, absolutely encouraging people to take part in that consultation. But I said that I think it needs to be as long as possible. But I think we need to go even further than that and actually be innovative with the way that we deliver the narrative in that consultation. So what I mean by that, quite simply, is that we make it clear, not perhaps with an introduction, but in language that people understand, so that not just developers and parish councils will understand, but Mr. Bloggs that lives at number 16 Middle Street will understand. And again, I don't say that to be any way disingenuous about the intelligence of our residents, but in reading a document that clearly needs to be legally sound, I understand that, but I think we need to be really clear that there are opportunities to put forward other sites, that this is not a done deal, that this is a proper consultation, because as one councillor said earlier, East Sussex are very very fond of a consultation. We are, and it's rightly so. We need to make sure that this is a consultation that reaches out to anybody who has an interest. That inherently will be most of the residents of Rother. We need to be very clear about that, and I think the narrative and indeed the press releases that go out with this and how we conduct ourselves during this consultation in terms of trying to generate that level of engagement engagement, regardless of anybody's political view. It really needs to deliver results in terms of perhaps there are other sites that could come forward, perhaps there are sites that are unsuitable, but we need to make sure that we hear all those voices across the towns and villages of Rother. So I hope that we will consider extending that consultation, and I hope that we will very, very strongly consider the narrative around that consultation as well. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, Teresa, you're the Cabinet portfolio holder and you sat there quite patiently for the last hour or so. Anything you wish to add?
No, not really. I mean, 8 weeks seems a long enough time, I think, for consultation, bearing in mind that most parish councils have seen the document now. So, they're getting from now to January, then for 8 weeks to consider putting forward their points of view. So I think they have considerably longer than 8 weeks to think about it and take part. I think it's very important that it goes through now and that we get the public consultation, and that we recognise, as Holly does, and said, that all sites are there and to be considered and can be discussed. So I just think this document just needs to go through to Cabinet now to let the planning department get on with it.
Thank you. John, are you going to move it?
Happy to move, but I do want to one point to reassure Councillor Maynard, because Burwash have already started discussing the document yesterday afternoon. They had a parish meeting of sorts, so the consultation will be the tip of an enormous iceberg. What I did want to ask before I move is, how do we get a realistic appreciation of the situation from the drainage companies? Because all too often we are told that the site can be connected to the drains, and it can't. It strains them and they start flooding. We have raw sewage in my village. We have raw sewage pumping into Buell Reservoir, much more serious, because that's raw sewage going into drinking water, which will, of course, be treated. But nevertheless, it's distinctly unpleasant. And our drainage systems are shot. How do we get the people to actually give us a realistic appreciation of whether that site can be connected? Having said that, I am very happy to move.
That is a point there, Holly. I know, like I said earlier, sort of at the start, this potential over the next sort of 14 years to increase the population of the district by a third, yet we won't see a new reservoir built. We won't see new sewage works built. My own ward at Winchelsea Beach, for the last 20 years, they've had sewage issues. I won't even mention Canberra Beach at the moment, with a sewage outlet from Eastbourne, of all places, that's washed half of its infrastructure up on Canberra Beach and all the way around to Dungeness and St Mary's Bay now. Where does it sort of, and electric as well. People are changing to electric cars. I was talking to a chap I ride a bike with, and he's sort of retired from power networks. And he said, all the transformers will need upgrading, because if everybody plugs in 5 years' time, everybody plugs a new car in at night, they're all going to blow up because they're not big enough. And even our council, we've been looking for 5 years to try and get electric car charging points in our car parks, but half of them we couldn't do it because there ain't enough juice in the system to run them. So, what sort of pressure there's no pressure we can put on. We just come up with a plan, and it's down to them to provide the stuff to service it, to a degree, isn't it, I suppose.
Well, I mean, the infrastructure and making sure that there is the right infrastructure is, a significant concern of everyone, of residents particularly. We got thousands of comments on it during the last consultation, We are currently preparing the next version of the infrastructure delivery plan, which will be a really detailed document, and we will publish the next version where we've got to in January. And the next big stage in that will be talking to those infrastructure providers, and that covers all of them, you know, the sewerage, the electricity people, everything. We need to be able to give them numbers in terms of how much development we're planning for and where it's going to be before they can then tell us whether they can accommodate that, and they need to then make their own plans for making sure that they do provide that infrastructure, because yes, it's their responsibility to provide it, and it's our responsibility to plan and to tell them where we're going to need it. So it's an iterative process, and we'll continue to speak with them. I don't know if Mike can add anything to that.
I said no, and then I'll say something. Right. So no, I think, and Holly makes the point very well. Until we go out to consultation and show this document, it's all hypothetical to them. So this kind of forces those conversations, as Holly said. So it's a really important part of having those conversations and moving us forward. Until we do that, it's all hypothetical growth. One other point, Chair, if I may, super quickly, is just Councillor Mrs Barnes made a very good point in respect of the area of outstanding natural beauty, as it still is in legislation, otherwise known as the national landscape. You know, I think that there will be people in our communities that feel that there isn't any protection as a result of the AONB. I would argue that's not the case. If it wasn't AONB 83% of the district, we would be meeting our housing targets, which would be, you know, almost double what we're proposing now. So whilst I'm sure that some people in the AONBs will feel that some of the growth is perhaps a little bit too high, it has made an impact on what we're doing. It's like anything in life. Planning's a balance, isn't it? We've got a balance between trying to provide new housing, protecting the wonderful high wheeled, etc. And hopefully we'll put that out to consultation and see what the public and stakeholders think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we've been moved, seconded by Councillor Cook.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. All those in favour of as we are? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Holly. Thank you very much, Mike. You're free to go. I bet you're glad to hear me say that. Right. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on. Item 6, pages 457 to 474. Performance report, second quarter 2025, which is Anna to introduce that one. I'll let you introduce whilst I go through my papers.
Thank you. Performance is looking really good again over quarter two. There are a couple of areas of very, very good performance. I didn't even mention it in my report, but the missed bins is, of course, still very good. The other area where there's been a very big improvement is in answering the freedom of information requests. You will have seen, I think, for about the last 6 months that we've been falling a bit short in that area. But the performance in this quarter has gone up to 99.4%, which I think really does show the great improvements that have been made in that area. So we are where we should be with that one. There are a few areas where performance is slightly less than where it should be. For example, customer services, the channel shift from the traditional methods to the online offer, we are aiming for 65%, but it's 59% online at the moment. I know we've talked about it before, but it does seem to be more about choice. So we still do offer all those traditional methods. And I think if we want to get closer to the online offer, it's about changing people's behaviour. The next one is environmental health and food inspections. That's 71% and not 90%. That is attributed to having a senior environmental health officer vacancy. We do have some vacancies across Rother, like technical professional vacancies, that we are finding it hard to recruit to, and this is one of them. So anybody that tuned in for the HR committee a couple of months ago will know that we are looking at measures to offer supplements for these hard to recruit to positions. but that is why that is lower than it should be. The next one is income from all assets under estates. We have a shortfall there of around £55,000. You will see from the narrative there that the variance is driven by delays in the letting of public conveniences and less rental income due to repairs to existing assets. But the plan is that will be rectified over the coming year. There's one more that I didn't emphasise in the report, but the average cost of placing a household in temporary accommodation, that is up a little bit for this quarter. Instead of being around the £1,200 mark that we would like, it's just over £1,300. We're hoping that will sort of rectify, but you'll see from the explanation that there's been sort of some more complicated households to place, and also the cost of accommodation is going up. So we're going to monitor this closely over the coming months, but it is just something to keep an eye on.
Good. On that last one, on the temporary, is that a month or a week for the temporary accommodation cost? But I'm saying how, so that would that be it's late in the evening.
I think Charlotte's going to answer this one.
Charlotte's going to answer that one.
I believe that's the cost for that household, for their term in temporary accommodation. I don't know if Joe has just come on the screen, so you might be able to clarify further. The cost per night are the figures in the column in between the 1,200 and the 1,300.
Joe, would you have an answer?
Yeah, it's usually the households usually are around between £50 and £75 a night, so that must be a monthly figure that we're looking at there.
Good, that's good. Thank you very much. You never know, do you? You just never know. You think, is someone having one over on us at £1,300 a week? You wouldn't know. You just wouldn't know. Now we know. So, yeah. Any points, Terry, Councillor Byrne?
Thanks, Chair. As a previous portfolio holder for digital transformation, I'd like to spring to the defence of customer service in terms of channel shift. I think we've done a marvellous job there, but the general public are being put off going to AI systems for the gas board, the electricity board, everything. They are so badly designed that this is ingrained now that, we don't want that sort of system. I'll either come into the office or I'll try and phone someone. So it's not our fault. I believe, have got a very good system. And I think the people who have made the channel shift are satisfied. I don't think we get many complaints about it. It's just that the numbers aren't coming through as we hoped. The people aren't adopting that approach as we'd hoped. But largely, as I say, due to the bad performance of not ourselves, but other similar digital offerings which just don't measure up. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And so you can't force people to go online, can you?
No, you have to bring them with you, and people just lump it all together. Do you want to chat with us? No, I want a real human being because I've been very disappointed with the chats I've got, but not necessarily from Rother, but from all the other people. So we're victims of other people's lack of perfection or quality.
Yeah. Charlie, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding people in temporary accommodation, this is why it's so important we continue to drive to buy up properties and rent them ourselves and provide temporary accommodation. I had a case 6 months ago where there was a family who had domestic violence issues. We couldn't place them within Rother. They ended up in Ringmer at £1,300 a month. But within 6 months, we managed to get them housing association let in Ticehurst, which was about 500 quid. So we don't want them in temporary accommodation too long in the private sector because it costs a lot of money. So it's so good that the initiative was originally started by Councillor Barnes and for pushing for us to become an authority that buys properties has proved to be a very successful policy. We've got to continue with that.
Thank you. It's a shame Mike's gone because planning, which for some time was always sort of amber, wasn't it, is now we're all green ticks, so he must have made an improvement somewhere. Anybody else got anything to say? Oh, Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. In the presentation, you didn't mention the climate strategy and the emissions report, which comes out once a year, really, which is amber. But looking at the factors that you mention, I realise it's very difficult to actually calculate. This is showing an increase, and that could be better than the situation, or it could be worse, because we've got things like the print room has been lost, which is a one-off thing. That won't be around next year. We've got Bexhill Museum electric supply is no longer Rother District Council supply. So we're getting factors that are outside our control. So I suppose I'm saying we mustn't sit on our laurels because it's hard to get a clear figure on these statistics. But as this is the only KPI for the climate strategy, I would urge, and I think we're going to be reviewing the KPIs, that is actually quite narrow of the strategy as a whole. We haven't talked about nature, we haven't talked about insulation of solar panels on our buildings. I'm sure there are lots of things that could come that could be really valuable KPIs from the strategy that we could include in the future. How many TPOs are appeared? Nippity, Mike's gone again. So I think that this is really prompts to me that the KPIs that we have for the climate strategy aren't really reflecting on our goals as an authority. And the KPIs is a way of involving our staff, that it means something, not just our council meetings. So I would urge that learning from this in the review of the KPIs, please.
Okay, Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, I've some sympathy with Councillor Burton, but we've got to remember we changed the KPIs quite deliberately to those we could actually control. And what we agreed, and perhaps it's at the State of the Nation report, we need to ask whether these things are covered. They were really to measure things like housing delivery, over which we've no control. And I suspect some of the assessments of our climate change are better measured in the State of the Nation report than in the KPIs, because we only influence them, we don't control them. And I think it's quite important that this item is about things which we directly control.
Yep. Councillor Burton.
May I respond?
Yeah, go on.
My examples were specifically items that we could control, and it's interesting that you mean the State of the District report, which is on tonight, and that shows that gap.
Yep.
I did say I had some sympathy with Councillor Burton. The two she picked out, I think, are ones we could well measure because we do control them.
Yep. Right. Well, if we're happy with this, what have we got to do? Resolve that this committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary. Really many actions to Cabinet as necessary, except for what Councillor Burton has said.
I think they won't need any urging, but we ought really to report on the continued success of our capital investment and the fact that we could with advantage be driving that on. I know it's pushing an open door, but I think we do need to remind ourselves that that's quite an important financial benefit to this authority.
Yep. So, someone want to move this? Councillor Burton will move, seconded Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna. Moving on. Item 7. There. Budget monitoring, 25-26 revenue, capital and savings, targets monitoring, Q2 update. Resolved. This committee reviews the report, makes any recommendations to Cabinet as necessary, and the proposed amendments to the capital programme as outlined in Appendix B and paragraph 11 be supported. Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so this report covers the Q2 position. The revenue outturn is now forecast to draw 1.18 million from reserves compared to the budgeted position of 694,000 and the Q1 position of 944,000, so a slight deterioration on our last reporting. Key movements and variances include some additional vacancies which have been held in Anna's service area, now forecast to save £174,000 in year. An increase in the deficit within the estates team of 358,000, which takes that total to 617,000 forecast for the year. Now, there's a large number of factors in that mix. 194,000 of that will be funded from flexible capital receipts because the work that's being undertaken either relates to improvements or enhancements, efficiencies, or relates to local government reorganisation and devolution, and therefore we're able to use the flexible capital receipts to fund that work. There are other variances, including additional interim staff in that area. We are currently out to recruit permanent staff, so we await the outcome of that process. There are also a larger than anticipated number of voids, which have generated additional costs and unanticipated repairs in that service area. So as I say, it's a complex area with a lot happening this year. We have positively seen an improvement in parking income compared to our Q1 variance. We've had a lovely summer and that always helps with the parking. So we're £240,000 forecast to be up on parking this year, but we have got the reduction in planning income of 260,000 reported in the paper. It should be noted that is an improvement on planning income. If Mike was still here, he'd definitely want to say this. It is an improvement on the planning income position from 24-25 from last year. It's just we set a very ambitious target for this year and the economy just hasn't moved in the direction that perhaps was anticipated when that target was set. You'll see in Appendix C of the report, we've provided an update on the savings targets. We've got 37% of them forecast to be green. That means they'll be delivered this year, and then just over 50% in addition amber, which will be partially. We've got 11% red, where we're now anticipating that they won't be deliverable this year, so they are part of the pressure that we're seeing in the budget. In terms of the capital programme, largely just small amendments made to the capital programme this time. They're outlined in Appendix B. The largest being an update to the DFG, a Disabled Facility Grant that is available to us, so that's 664,000. You'll have noted in the covering report in paragraph 11 that I also make reference to an additional item that we anticipate bringing forward. I hope that we'll be able to articulate it specifically in the tables coming to Cabinet and full Council later this month and in early December for the Fairlight Coastal Development Scheme. The only reason it's not included in the table of numbers right now is we're just working through the finer detail of the exact sum that we require, and the different funding streams that are available to us. We're exploring all the options. So I've highlighted it in paragraph 11 so that the committee are aware of it coming forward. Finally, I'll just note paragraphs 15 and 16, which reference our reserves position. You'll have heard me say before, we remain in a challenging financial position. We are working very closely with all service areas to continue to identify savings in year and for next year. And you'll see that our forecast general reserve is now anticipated to be at 2.5 million at the year end, which is much lower than we would want it to be. So we're working to try and address that position. And I'll pause there, Chair, and take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McGurk.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondering, Charlotte, it's a really challenging position, and with the reserves, that is really worrying. What are we doing to manage voids, the performance?
In estates specifically? I'll probably pass over to Joe, who manages that area. I think he'll probably be able to give you a better answer than I could. Thank you.
Yep. Joe, if you're there, ready to roll?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the management of voids is a challenge. We're using we use commercial agents to advertise properties, which is a novel thing for this council, who previously just used to host things on the website, which didn't necessarily attract as broad commercial interest. The void levels are a challenge, but they're always a challenge. There are some challenges in the market as well, with the economy, with the announcements of the budget coming up. That does seem to have, over the summer, make the market seems less buoyant than it has been previously. But we are on the case of agents. We chase the agents. We're making sure that we try to minimise voids. Some of the voids are unavoidable due to waiting for demolition of Skinner's Shed, for example, the dilapidated building at West Station that is also sitting void, and a number of others that are in need of repair and have been left really not very well managed for some years, which is partly why you see the need for the extra resources in that team to bring the team up to standards. And the recent audits, any of you who follow the audit committee will have seen that we're slowly trying to be managing to improve that performance, but it was really a service that hasn't received enough investment over a number of years. So it's a real challenge trying to turn that round.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnes, John.
Yes, I know the efforts that Joe's team are making, and it is an uphill struggle. It does lead me to wonder. I looked at the strategic asset management, and we're expecting now really no more than half of the income we were budgeting. I do wonder whether we shouldn't consider disposing some of those assets, or possibly considering them making a different use of that site, because we have other problems, which frankly, carrying assets that are non-productive isn't terribly helpful to us in our present situation. So I would ask that somebody takes a really beady eye look at the assets we hold and decides, as we did with public conveniences, that we can actually either improve the income or dispose of the asset somewhere else. It does seem to me this is a line that has been wrong for far too long, and it's not Joe and his team's fault, but they've inherited a pretty bleak inheritance.
Right, well,
Sorry.
Charlotte, if you want to come back.
Yeah, just briefly, and I think Joe has his hand up too. Yeah, just to say, it's not so much about the income deteriorating, because actually the income is slightly up. It's the costs that we've incurred that have led to the deterioration of the surplus that team would normally deliver. So I just wanted so that was clear. I know Joe's team, they are working on looking at assets and what should be held for development and what should be held for sale, etc. But I'll hand over to Joe. Thank you.
Joe, if you want to come back.
Yeah, and think, the finance report is trying to summarise quite a complex situation. Really, what's driving this is the use of agency staff. That's what's driving this deficit, and the reasons for that are that we, only managed to put the business case together to SLT to do this investment and make the case for this investment after the budgets were set. So you're really sort of realising those costs in year as opposed to before budget setting. That's what's really driving the variance. But the voids challenge is also something not to, and Councillor Barnes, comments are welcome. There is an active disposal of presently five assets are presently being actively disposed, and we've just undertaken a big land review of which we're looking at the viability and of disposal of up to 40 assets in that regard as well. So there is an active disposal plan, and you have seen, actually, Cabinet has seen some of those land disposals in recent months. One in Canberra, for example, and those will continue to come forward.
Thank you. I just draw your attention to item 2 here. We've got the proposed amendments to the capital programme as outlined in Appendix B at paragraph 11. This is the Fairlight scheme, as was mentioned. So we're happy that that is supported to go to Cabinet. Yep. And then back to the original one. We've reviewed the report. We haven't really got many recommendations to make to Cabinet, have we? Well, except for looking at...
We
welcome what Joe said.
Welcome what they're doing on asset disposals and encourage them to make
going.
it a very serious policy.
Yeah, all right. Someone happy to move this one? Councillor Cook? Yes. Yeah, Councillor Cook moves, seconded. Councillor McGurk, or Councillor Byrne, whichever, or Councillor Mrs Barnes, anybody. Everybody wants to do. So all those in favour? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Item 8. State of the district report. That's right, isn't it? You've done that. Yeah. State of the district, resolve that state of the district report 2025 be noted. I know we don't usually have things for noting, but this one's a bit of a document. There's a lot of work gone into it, so it only seems fair to actually look at it. Anna, that's you. Over to you.
Thank you. So it's the state of the district for 2025. It's more of a refresh, really, because a lot of the data supplied by ONS hasn't been updated, but there's been a few things that we've done in this report. We've aligned it to our key council themes, and we've included other things such as data on climate, travel to work and unemployment. We have also included a link to the state of the county. So this document is really sort of a central point for all data. So you've got the state of the district and you've got the state of the county. There has been a bit of a change with the ONS reporting system online, in that in previous years you could go behind the public data to see where they got it from. But at the moment you can't. So you've got the headline figures, but you can't investigate further on their site. So what I was going to say is I'm not an expert on all aspects of this data. So if you do have any specific questions about any element of it, I'm likely to need to take that away to get a bit of help in answering those questions. You will see that it's quite big. It covers lots of different aspects. I've just pulled out a couple of things that sprung to mind from the report. The population has increased by 4.6% in 2 years. I think that goes back to the conversation we had about the local plan. But the South East average for population increase over that period was 7.5%. So we've got bigger, but not as much as other places in the South East. Debt is lower in Rother. We're shown as one of the lowest districts for debt, but fuel poverty has increased. So there's loads of things that I could draw out, but I'll just leave it there and take any questions.
Councillor McGurk.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question from me. Anna, I'm sure you're going to be able to answer this. You'll know all about it. But I was just looking at the variability of gigabit. Gigabit. Does that just mean Wi-Fi? Does that just mean internet speed? I assume. But it's just very variable, and particularly in rural areas, it looks like we're not doing great. Is there anything we can do about maximising availability of speed at home so people can work at home easier?
Yeah, I do believe it's about broadband. So I think that is what it's about. I think we know there's been issues with the rollout of broadband to rural communities, so I think it's relating to that. But what we can do about it, I'm not sure. But I am happy to take it away.
I think on that one, there was some years ago I think there was a scheme with the county council, wasn't there, that they were doing a improved broadband. Now I don't know if I'm classed as rural or not. I'm about 3/4 of a mile outside of Rye, but I've got 140 gigabits. I've got my own cable. BT put my own cable in all the way from the tennis club, all the way to my house. Yeah, so it's not all bad. I know Winchelsea was particularly crap some years ago. Winchelsea was like the second slowest in the entire country, I think. But it must have improved. Well, I assume it's improved. It might not have because it's not my ward anymore. John, Councillor Barnes.
Just to say, Chairman, Brightling was so despairing they got their own scheme going, and only one house in the parish is not fully connected. I'm sure Andrew Webmore would advise other parishes of how he did it. And it was a bespoke scheme. And Charlotte, there may be lessons there, but it is fundamentally for county to drive the digital transformation. The thing I missed in this report, and I hope I haven't missed it by accident, is I thought we were going to have the housing figures and the extant planning permission figures. I know we report them to government separately, but it would be quite convenient to have them for the year in the State and Nation report. And my other comment, I think, rather than the question, I always feel that life expectancy is a very poor measure of public health. And I wonder if we could consult the Director of Public Health at County to see if we can get a slightly better range of stats which tell us more about what is really happening to our population rather than what's happening as we near death. That said, I have every sympathy with the officers at the moment. The ONS statistics are all over the place. But there is one here which is startling, and again, I don't know what we can do about it because it seems to be a nationwide problem. But it really is quite startling that a quarter of our working population is inactive. That is a major problem for the economy. And I simply pull it out because it's only marginally worse than the national average. But it really is a disastrous figure, and it will cripple the welfare state just as it's crippling the economy.
We've got down here in my notes, any particular issues could be looked at by a task and finish group in the future. Is that something worth sort of considering in the future? Up to you, or are we happy with it as it is? Hannah?
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to Councillor Barnes's point about how active everybody is. We've got a member briefing on Thursday at 5:30 about the Healthy Ageing project. So work is being done across Rother to improve activity and other things. We've also got the Active Rother programme, but it would be great if people could tune in on Thursday evening to the presentation about healthy ageing, because I think some of that, there's some really, really good initiatives, and the plan's going to be rolled out over the next 2 years. And any kind of support and help you can give about encouraging people to engage in the programme would be really gratefully received.
If you quick, my machine's only got 5% of battery left.
On healthy ageing, there's a group of people in Rye, for instance, who are trying to create what's known as a blue zone, where people age well and healthily and create a sense of community and opportunities for exercise, some great stuff going on. But the task and you referred to a task and finish group, Chair, and it just reminded me that in the report, one of the statistics that really sticks out about Rother is the density of holiday homes that we've got, which is so much higher than anywhere else, and reminded me about our task and finish group on holiday, short-term lets, and the impact on Rye, Winchelsea and Camber and parts of Icklesham. And so just to flag that up, there's no actions, but just to flag that up because there were some really useful actions arising out of that task and finish group, and it would be nice to hear about that at some point, where we're at.
Councillor Clark, Charlie?
Thank you, Chair. I am the Cabinet spokesperson for older people, and one of the things that concerns me, when you look at the issues of well-being among the older population, people over 80 is expected to increase by 12% over the next 5 years. Not this government, but even the previous one, they've never really dealt with the issue of adult social care funding. For Rother and East Sussex, it's always been underfunded, and yet the need has grown. So hopefully when we become a unity authority, there'll be much more investment in adult social care, because over the years, I've had 13 years on county, some of the support we used to give to voluntary organisations of people when they came out of hospital, like the Stroke Association and that, we are no longer able to do that, and there are a lot of people that need support when they come out of hospital and that sort of thing. And the other aspect is child services. We're struggling with that. I get so many complaints from residents now about they've got children who are SEND, special needs, and it's taking so long to get appointments because the sheer volume increase of people that are asking to register their children for SEND is increasing. So that affects families in Rother. So the Unity Authority has really got to deliver on this carrot of, if you become Unity Authority, you'll be better funded, because all those issues really affect our residents in Rother and their health and well-being. And without additional funding, it's always going to be a problem.
I'll go online now. Councillor Maynard, are you there?
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I've been waiting patiently as always. So it's just to firstly declare an interest as once again, as we are now definitely in the realms of the auspices of my county responsibility as the lead member for adult social care and health. Certainly, I'd like to echo and agree with the comments that have been made by a number of members regarding healthy ageing and how important that is. And if you were minded at a later date to set up any sort of task and finish group to look at this issue, I'm more than happy to facilitate a conduit whereby the Director of Public Health, Darryl Gale, could be asked to participate, whether that just be via a Q&A or to give a presentation on what's been done, because I think that, you know, some officers are exceptional in their ability to be able to make a presentation. He's certainly one of those, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the data that is behind all of the issues that have been discussed around public health and healthy ageing this evening. So declare the interest, but also if I can be of any help in that, I would certainly be happy to do so. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chair. So I note, Anna, your difficulty with the statistics that you've been getting, and another source for carbon footprint is via the WWF, the Worldwide Fund of Nature and Carbon Footprint, which can be linked to postal code and gives you comparisons with England. So that might be, and also a bit more user-friendly than how you've got it presented now. So maybe for another time that would be useful. What struck me of the report, and they're all links into healthy ageing, is our poor housing and poverty, this EPC levels being so low, and they're all interlinks with the poor well-being, because if you've got a cold, leaky home, which is a phrase I've heard many times, but it really hit me reading this report, and I would link in the possible task and finish group to help bring in whatever we can do to support people having warmer, drier homes for the future.
And Councillor Thomas.
Good Chair. Again, all the reports we've had this evening have been very good indeed, and this is no exception. Following up on Councillor Barnes' point, I wonder whether Councillor Barnes would agree that a measure of healthy life expectancy might give a better idea of the state of health within the district than simply the death rates, because that's a very key thing. What I think is happening at the moment is that life expectancy is not declining as much as healthy life expectancy. So we've got more and more elderly people who are kind of lingering on, but lingering on in very poor health indeed. Yeah. And I think that's a very major problem. Now, the second thing is that, of course, we've already had a task and finish group looking at health, haven't we, under the chairmanship of Councillor Cook. And I think it'd be interesting to compare what happens to our recommendations as against what actually policies are implemented. You know, because I'm getting a bit worried about that. We had that excellent report by Councillor Cook, but what has happened to it? We've also had a report on housing, but what's going to happen to it? Because there doesn't appear to be any money. So there seems to be a gap between the policies we come out with, the subjects we investigate, and the capacity of the council to actually implement them. I do know that development work is taking place on the housing strategy. I'm very glad to see it. But of course, you know, when we were looking at the budget problem, there isn't much money available to actually implement anything. So that's another point. And the other point I noticed was the government statistics have shown an extraordinary increase in levels of deprivation in Bexhill Central. It really is across a whole range of measures. And I don't quite know why that is, but I think it may be related to Councillor Burton's point about housing. I think an increasing number of properties in that particular district are now becoming multiple occupied houses, and therefore bringing in people who are in a state of deprivation, and that's having an effect on the overall deprivation levels. But I just wonder to what extent those kind of things are being reflected in our statistic gathering. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You've been scribbling away, Anna, so I assume you're making notes for future reference. Would you think, is there any point, might seem a wrong word, is there any point, I'll say it anyway, is there any point to a task and finish group? Would that be useful going forward, or looking at different sort of task and finish groups we've used before, are there figures, and would that be useful?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think it's a good point that Councillor Thomas makes about the recommendations from previous task and finish groups. And so if it is okay, I think that would be a good place to start to see what happened and what we can do next.
Okay, that's what we do. So, resolved that the State of the District report be noted. So, someone want to move that? Councillor Cook. Yep, we've done that. Seconded by Councillor McGurk. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Last item, you'll be pleased to hear. Agenda item 9, It's a work programme for 25, 26, so 17th of 11th we've done that. 26th of January next year is draft revenue capital budget programme financial plan, key performance targets, council plan update, Rother-owned leased accommodation policies. And then in March, community partnership, safety partnership annual report. That's when the policeman comes and talks for a long time, sometimes. Performance report, third quarter, revenue budget, capital programme monitoring, period 9. And then 27th of April, call-in urgency procedure. That one at the moment looks like we'll be doing that one online because it's quite clear, it's quite easy. So we can do that at home and save Lisa some travel money. Go on, Councillor McGurk.
Could we squeeze in an audit of task and finish groups, Councillor Cook's and the holiday lets one, and I don't know if there are other ones, but maybe a quick audit report of actions arising from recent task and finish groups?
I'm looking at Anna. You'll be doing it.
Well, I was looking at butter, and I think, yeah.
Go on in.
Chair, if you're happy to include that as an item on the agenda, that's fine.
Oh, we've got hands up now. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the reason there's been no progress against the recommendations from the Health and Wellbeing Task and Finish group is because there's no officer. Once this was done with Ben Hook, and a new officer was going to be found, and every time I've asked, it's, oh, we haven't got the officer time. And if there's no officer time to even talk about it, then there's no officer time to implement anything. And are we actually wasting our time, our democratic republic, I was going to say, democratic services, and our own time and our officers' time, if it's actually we're just going to go round and round in circles? I mean, I think we need to acknowledge that that was held. We need to acknowledge what the recommendations were, and taking into account the state of the district, we need to be able to say, well, okay, maybe some of the things we could put into practice, and that would improve the state of the district. But I don't want any. Yes, it's frustrating, but I'm not laying the blame at anybody. I'm not feeling hurt that it's not been continued. It is just the stress and the strain on the members, our officers at the moment.
Go to Lorna. You've sat there quietly and thought, oh, there's something I can say. So go ahead, Lorna, Chief Executive.
Thanks, Chair. I do think it's perfectly reasonable to request a monitoring report of the actions arising from our task and finish groups. Whether we'll be able to pull that together for the next meeting in January, we'll try. We'll report back as far as we've got with it. And I do think there's some merit to looking at the issues that are coming out in the State of the District report and the proposed way that we intend to tackle some of these through our task and finish group actions. So we'll go away and pull those recommendations together, some of which may have been dealt with and undertaken. That's great news if that's the case. And then we need to be realistic about the time that we have left as well, the District Council, and what we can focus on. I personally feel when it comes to social care, we need to be thinking about the design of the new council with the housing responsibilities becoming part of a unitary authority. There's a really big opportunity there to do things differently. And what I would say is I think we need to make sure that our capacity is used really, really effectively in making sure that we have our say in the co-design of these new services going forward, and I think that's where we should put our efforts. Overview and Scrutiny Committee might want to make some recommendations into that process into the future. We're clearly not there yet, as we don't even have a footprint of the new authority yet, but things are progressing on LGR, and just to let the committee know that we're expecting the consultation to come out shortly on the proposals for the new authority, and that is something that I will alert all members to when that comes out, and it's really important that we're coordinating a response on that. So these are the sorts of things that we have been working on as well at the same time that we've been trying to tackle the recommendations that have come forward from Audit Committee, from Overview and Scrutiny, from our council plan. and resources are tight, as Charlotte alluded to. Well, she didn't allude to, she said it very straight. You know, we do have a budget problem and we do have a capacity problem. So it's really important that we focus efforts on those things that are going to make a difference in a legacy into the future. And I think that's the piece of work that we need to bring back to you. And if there are some actions that would have been really nice to do, but given all that context, we don't think we can take forward, then we need to be upfront about that and make a recommendation back to the committee. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Yep, that's very useful. Yeah, very good. John?
Yes, one of the things that hasn't happened, I don't blame anybody for this, but we now need to think about it in the future, is the Health and Wellbeing Board, on which I'm not sure who our current representative was. I was the representative for 4 years, and there is an annual report which we were going to bring to this committee, and it has never come. It's always lagged in items for consideration at the bottom. The interesting question is whether parish councils need to be made aware of that report as we go forward, because it's quite an important report for the population, and I'm not sure it gets very much publicity from county.
I wouldn't know. Anna, anything to say, Ed?
No, but I'm happy to look into it. Yeah.
Right, well, I would think that, yeah, well, we've heard from Lorna, Chief Executive, say, you know, they can look at task and finish groups. Anna says she can look at those, so hopefully, you know, in a meeting or two, we might get, you know, we can tie some bits together and see what we can come up with. Happy with that? Briefly, Mary? I've only got 1% now.
Thank you. Planning enforcement was going to have more meetings. We had the first one, but we do now need to understand whether, you know, whether the rules of the game have slightly altered. I know, you know, we've taken on a new enforcement officer, and I know with our new planning head of planning that we probably are looking at different ways of doing it. But it would be nice to know whether we're making progress as a group to achieve what we decided that we would ask for.
I'll leave that with the chair of the group.
I keep asking.
So yeah, well, I think it may be different as well with the new planning system. I know when the new planning system came out, the first enforcement notice I got was blank. But so that's been sorted out, so that now works, and it's a lot more concise.
My reason for asking, Chairman, was that I thought if you wanted to substitute a new working party in, and we'd already reached capacity, whether we should be asking questions about the longevity of the enforcement group.
Well, I suppose it depends where you want to go with it. If you wanted to, it was set up for a reason. If at the moment things are working, then there's no point to carry on, is there?
But basically, I'm the wrong person to be asking the question.
Who's the right person?
I'm chairman of this committee, I think.
What, me?
Mm-hmm.
I get the sense that the task and finish group has not been convened very often, and I think we ought to ask why.
Wow. I suppose we have to ask Mike, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know, but I'm happy to talk to Mike tomorrow about it.
Yeah. That helps. Yeah, ask Mike and put him in contact with Mary.
We're not hostile to the idea, it's just we want to know where it's going.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Word with Mike, put him in touch with Mary, and she can sort it out. Right, hopefully, no, yeah, I've gone flat, so that's it. We've got to go home now. Right, well, if that's everything, which hopefully it is, I will say thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you much to the officers online, members online. officers in the room and everybody else. Safe journey home, and meeting closed by the watch is 12 minutes past 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.